Okay, so we're going to continue talking about respect for colleagues. 5.4 says, assist and encourage colleagues by sharing information and serving as mentors when appropriate. I think that this is something that we lack in the interpreting community. I think that so often you become an interpreter and that's just what you do. You just interpret. And after you guys have gone through your internship, you're going to recognize how important it is to have mentors, or maybe you already recognize that, just because it's so hard to learn this without actually doing it, or being able to see someone doing it and to glean from that. And so I still to this day, especially with ethical scenarios like this, I still to this day have interpreters that I will call and say, I don't know if I handled this well, or what do you think I should have done in a situation? Giving them understanding that I'm giving them very minimal information. I'm definitely not giving them the confidential information when I'm talking to a mentor, so understand that. But just as I will be giving you guys ethical scenarios in class, I make sure to cover over some of the information to ensure that I'm never letting the other interpreter know who or what in particular that I'm speaking of, but to give them general information so that they can help and give me some feedback on how perhaps I could handle that situation in the future. Okay? It's very important to both serve as mentors and to seek out mentors yourselves. Okay? And then 5.5, we discussed this with consumers, but it's also important to obtain the consent of colleagues before you bring an intern to an assignment. There may be a very good reason why your team interpreter knows you shouldn't have an intern in a particular situation. For example, it may even have nothing to do with having an intern there. It may be the logistics of a classroom or what have you. There may only be a certain number of seats in a classroom, and maybe my team interpreter, remember colleagues mean team interpreters or other people in the profession here, maybe they know that there's a limited number of seats in the classroom, and had I let them know we were going to have an intern ahead of time, they could have said, oh wait, we shouldn't do that until maybe later in the semester when students start withdrawing and there's an extra seat available for them to come in and work with us. So it's very important to also let your team interpreter know that you're going to be working with an intern, or to ask their permission and obtain their consent ahead of time. So, just be aware of that. Also, I want to briefly touch back on the approach colleagues privately tenet, or illustrative behavior rather, with this tenet. There was a time where, this wasn't my colleague, this was my consumer, if you think about it in terms of the Code of Professional Conduct. I was working at an elementary school, but just to put it in terms where you can understand, I was working at an elementary school, and I had just gotten hired, and I had gotten my schedule, and one of the people said, ooh, they're going to stick you with such and such teacher because nobody likes him, and he is mean to all interpreters, and so I bet you're going to have to work with that person. Sure enough, I had to work with that person. So, whatever. I'm the newbie, I'm the rookie, I'll do that. So I went into the classroom, and the student I was working with was actually deaf-blind. He was probably more blind than he was deaf. I had to repeat in English and in sign language what the teacher was saying to him if he couldn't quite comprehend what the teacher had said, or hear or see what he had said. So I did that at one point. The teacher had said something to the students. The student said, "What, Miss Jones?" because Jones was my maiden name. And I said, "Okay, Bobby, the teacher said," and I signed and spoke to him what the teacher had said. The teacher came over to me, this was a second grade class, looked at me, and in front of the whole class, just railed on me and said, "I can't stand you interpreters, you're always giving the answers to the students," and blah, 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 blah. So anyway, he went on his rant, and I let him. And I just sat there and nodded and smiled and said, "Okay, whenever you're done giving instruction to the class, I need to talk to you out in the hallway for just a moment." He kind of looked at me strangely, but he finished doing what he was doing, and we walked out into the hall. And I stood there with him and I said, "This is professional. This is what professional people do. I would never talk to you in front of your students like you just talked to me. I demand the same respect. I didn't give the student the answers. I didn't have anybody give me answers when I was in second grade. I'm certainly not giving somebody else the answers. I'm simply doing what I was instructed to do. If you have a problem with the way that I'm handling things, please take me to the side, as I'm doing right now, and speak to me as an adult, because I would never treat you the way that you treated me in front of your students. And he was like, I'm so sorry, I hadn't thought about that. It's just some of the interpreters give the answers, and you know, once we got to communicate about it, he very quickly realized that that wasn't what I was doing. In fact, probably that wasn't what the other interpreters were doing either, but nobody had really explained the process of interpreting to him, especially with this particular student. And so after that, we became friends. I went to his wedding, you know, we were good. And even though he was my colleague, I give that example to you just to say that's probably how you should be handling things with other interpreters as well as your consumers, okay? So it's just something to keep in the back of your mind as you're working. Lots of things in these videos to keep in the back of your mind, if you'll notice. Next, we're going to be talking about business practices, so get ready for that.